What's going on, everyone? This is the Founder Hour podcast. I'm your co-host, Pat, and on today's episode, we sat down with Ellen Marie Bennett. She's the founder and CEO of Hedley Bennett, which specializes in handcrafted premium aprons and culinary gear for the best chefs, home cooks, and makers in the world. Her story is a wild one, full of adventure and discovery. So we were excited to get a chance to hear about Ellen's early days, moving to Mexico after graduating from high school and creating a whole new life for herself there, why she decided to move back to the US and pursue a career in the culinary world, what sparked the idea for Hedley Bennett, and some of the early challenges she had while launching the company. We also talk about the impact of COVID-19 on the business and what she believes the future of food and hospitality will look like. Here we go.
So I grew up in LA. I'm from Glendale. And when I was
Love it.
Whoa.
Great way to start
Did
the
not
episode.
expect
Whoa,
that.
I know. Totally
What are you,
unexpected.
part Armenian?
I'm not, although
You are today.
A lot of people think I was.
Where did you go to school?
I went to a little school in La Cañada.
Okay,
So-
I lived in La Crescenta for a while,
Amazing,
so
amazing.
not too far.
So born and raised in LA, but I lived in big chunks in Mexico. So I'm half Mexican, half English, was born in LA. Definitely identify with my Mexican side more than my, I guess, American side, if you will.
It's probably more cultural, right?
Yeah, it's just like it's more colorful and alive, and everybody just like really cares, and it's just they are what they are, and they're not trying to be something other than themselves. And I really appreciated that growing up, seeing the difference between my American friends and my Mexican friends.
And so what kind of stuff were you into as a kid? Like, what did you spend your time doing?
I was definitely unusual. I really enjoyed design. I still do. But my way of expressing design was like going to Home Depot and buying cans of paint and painting my mother's living room when I was like 13. So it was very handyman oriented, I guess, in a weird way. And I loved inventing things in the kitchen. And I just liked doing things with my hands. Like I liked just seeing it in my head and then making it come to life. And I did it whether it was with a can of paint or sponge painting my mother's bedroom yellow or going to the grocery store and buying a bunch of ingredients and figuring out how to make that one thing my Mexican grandma made. Like I was just always doing something and trying to figure out how to do something better, or growing tomatoes in like massive volumes on my mom's little patio. Like I was just a very active kid, and my mom wasn't really into letting us quote unquote hang out with our friends. Like that wasn't something that we did. We were just all about productivity. And she worked as a nurse, so she worked like 12 hours a day. So she was just constantly hustling at life and just working and trying to like succeed for us. And so we just never really we'd never even thought to not do that ourselves.
Ellen, this is a super random question, but you brought up the word paint. And right before while we were setting up for this episode, we saw this wall, which is, for those that can't obviously see us, is just like this wallpaper type of wall that like you could write on.
Yes.
Right? So we were talking about the fact that wouldn't it be cool if there was paint that you could just write on and it's like erasable.
Oh,
So
it
as
totally
someone-
exists.
Okay, perfect. There you go. So we thought we were just about to invent something new, but I'm glad you were able to kind of give us an answer. I figured you'd know as soon as you said you were obsessed with paint and went to Home Depot. I was like, she's got it now.
She's got to know that.
Yeah, she's
Paint
gotta know
Connect.
that. Yeah.
Was like all that stuff pretty innate? Like, did you like have that in you growing like from like as long as you can remember, or was there like a time in your life when you were younger that caused you to be that way?
I think I just had this very nerdy curiosity about me that I wanted to figure it out. And nobody said, no, you can't. So I never even questioned if I couldn't. My mom literally let me sponge paint her bedroom yellow and came home from work and it was yellow. And she was like, oh, that's nice. And that was it. There was nothing else attached. It wasn't like, what are you doing? You should have checked with me. Why didn't you verify that the color was...
Which probably is the more common like reaction.
1,000%.
Yeah.
And anything that I did that was kind of out there, whether it was, one time I tried to make her bagels and I committed to the recipe and I didn't realize that it was like serving size of 14 or something crazy. And so she came home and the entire kitchen was covered in bagels. But I'm talking plates of bagels, like piles of bagels everywhere. And she was just like, okay, cool.
Super chill.
Just so chill about it that it just made me think, okay, well, I guess I can try anything and it doesn't really matter. No one's going to say no. I'm just going to do it.
You talk about like being like super in touch with more of your Mexican side and your Mexican roots. Like why did that happen? I mean, like, was it something that just you grew up with, or was it ingrained in you? I know you are part Mexican, but that doesn't always mean that you're like really into the culture. I know a lot of Armenians or Italians that they're just like in America, they're Americans. They don't care, whatever, you know. But like, what was it about you that made you so, interested and passionate, so much so that you went to live there?
Right. I think that having gone to Mexico for 2 to 3 months at a time when I was really young gave me this really radical contrast view on culture. And when you are going to school in LA, where everyone wants to be an actor and they want to like grow up to be a model or whatever the hell it is. And all that is fine, right? But you see that. And then you go to Mexico and my friends barely had floors in their homes and they were running on the streets playing soccer barefoot and like go get tortillas from the corner for lunch at noon and get a giant thing of Coca-Cola that's in a reusable bottle. Like everything was so dramatically different and people were so much happier. And I could just feel the happiness. And as a young kid, you don't necessarily know the intricacies of their lives and, financial statements and all that stuff. But I just felt a difference. And I liked it.
What do you think caused that? Why were they happier? I mean, I'm sure that's probably the case now too. But like, why is it that you felt that way?
I strongly believe that their sort of attention and where they were focused in life was focused on things that didn't have to do with physical, purchases. And if you look at a lot of young kids in the United States, their lives revolve around what toy they're getting and what sort of accoutrements they have and do they have a pool or a big house, or it's a lot of comparison. And I happen to not have to experience that because my friends in Mexico really didn't care what we had or didn't have. It was more like, who's going to win at soccer today? Who's going to play better on the streets?
I'm curious though, like more recently, has it changed with like social media becoming what it is and people having more of like a window into people's lives and how other people live their lives in other countries?
Yeah.
Because it's such a small world now, right? Like wherever you live, most likely, there's a window view into that area. So do you think that's changed at all?
Such a good question. I don't know. I assume it has changed a little bit, but for me, it hasn't changed my perspective, right? If anything, it's just amplified the value that I find in people and just having good people around you that are good humans and that care and that do the right thing and that do the right thing when no one is looking, right?
Yeah.
It's good to say you do the right thing when everyone's watching, but what are you doing behind the scenes? And that's really, for me, a huge differentiator with who I surround myself with. And I just have a good egg radar. And so if you have people around you that are doing well in life, like that's awesome. But that shouldn't be the only thing they care about is the doing well in life. Like, do they care about their family and their people and their community?
Like at the expense of what, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah. There's got to be some sort of a balance in it.
Agreed.
When did you end up, or what part of your life did you end up deciding to move there, to Mexico?
When I turned 18, I had graduated high school. I was doing all these like random jobs in LA and I loved cooking and I knew I wanted to cook, but I wasn't totally clear on which path I was going to take to do that. Also, culinary school is like $70,000. My parents couldn't afford it. My parents were divorced, so my mom was like, that's just impossible for me to afford. So I went to Mexico for 2 months and I ended up staying for 4 years. And it was like the best thing I could have ever done.
What part of Mexico, by the way?
Mexico City.
Okay.
And did you like know anyone there? Like, did you have any friends?
No, I knew nobody. It was really kind of on a whim. I had a one-way ticket and I thought I'm going to stay probably like 1 or 2 months. And I had a little room in a house with a bunch of other like students that were in Mexico.
I'm assuming it was a really good 2 months.
It wasn't 2 months that you would expect of me out like raging or something. Yeah. No, I just kind of realized like, damn, I'm in another country. Nobody knows me. There's no context here. I can just build it like I built my mom's room with sponge paint, right? It was sort of similar.
Like, I just reinvent myself, to start from scratch,
just
or like
figure it out with no judgment. No one was around saying, are you going to be an actress, or are you going to be a model? Are you going to go to college? What college are you going to go to? Like, all of that sort of disappeared, and it let me start from scratch in a way that was awesome. And I lived there. I got so many jobs. I worked every job you could possibly imagine, because of course my parents were like, you need to come home now. And I said, hell no, I'm staying. So they cut me off financially, and I literally just I got my Mexican citizenship. I rented an apartment, and then I rented out all these bedrooms, sort of pre-Airbnb, but I was just hustling, and it helped me find my own sea legs. So when I came back to LA after 4 years, LA was exactly the same. I had just dramatically changed, and it felt like someone had rolled out the red carpet of experience, and I was just like, bring it fucking on.
Yeah. I don't want to jump around too much, but I know that I want to focus a little bit on that Mexico kind of experience you had. But you talk about moving there after high school. What was your high school experience like? Because I know we talked to so many founders, and everybody has a different experience. Some of them knew exactly what they wanted to be. Some of them were dropping out. Some of them were like, I hated school, I hated life, everything sucked. And now that we're multimillionaire founders. But what was your experience like? I mean, I know you talk about being passionate about cooking and doing things with your hands. Were you doing that while you were in high school?
Yeah, I was. I mean, again, my mom wasn't letting me hang out, quote unquote. So I would come home, and I was doing all kinds of weird handyman things around the house, or painting something, or building something, or whatever. I was just keeping busy. I started doing my mom's finances when I think I was 14 or 15. I wanted to be like her financial advisor, and I thought that was fascinating. And I was just trying to learn everything that I could about life. And because she didn't say no to anything, I was doing her bills. I went and found the car that I was going to get when I turned 16. I went and found a car, negotiated the car, took my sister, and we went and illegally drove the car. The dealership somehow let us test drive the car. And then I had everything lined up, and then I just brought my mom, and I was like, you need to sign here. This is the deal that I got. This is the right car. And that was how I was running my childhood. So really, I was in charge, and she was there to help me get things done.
Right. How did that make you feel though? Being almost the one in charge, even though you were just a kid?
I just kind of didn't know any other way. It just seemed right. And I will say, as an entrepreneur, it's kind of the same thing. You don't have all the answers, and you definitely shouldn't claim that you do, but you just figure it out. And it's this decision that you are taking on that responsibility, and then you get the answers to it.
I'm curious, in those years, you're graduating high school. I'm sure your friends are going off to college, and it seems like they figured it out, right? This is what I want to study. This is what I'm going to be.
1,000%.
And boom. And you're kind of going off on your own path, going to Mexico.
Yeah, to rent rooms for people, pre-Airbnb. What the hell?
And with someone that has so many interests, how did you figure out eventually what you wanted to focus on? It sounds like you had, you like this, you like that, you were good at this, you were good at that. How did you try to narrow it down, or did you at some point narrow it down and go after that?
Obviously, everything sort of revolved around creating, right? Creating something in my head and then bringing it to life, whether it was food or painting or whatever. But I always cooked. That was the through line in all of this. If I was painting, I was also making bagels at the same time, right? There was always some creativity in the kitchen happening. And while I was in Mexico, I decided to go to culinary school there because it made sense. It was less expensive. I had the opportunity. I found the school. I got myself into the school. The stars aligned. And it did take me trying a bunch of different things to really feel which one gave me the most enjoyment and excitement. So while I was living in Mexico, I was the lottery announcer for Mexican, the lottery, the actual lottery, bienvenidos a su sorteo, trisexy clásico. I was literally the lottery announcer on television. And I did simultaneous translating for the Mexican Railroad Union. I was an English tutor. I actually ended up doing modeling. I did commercials. I mean, I did anything I could get my hands on.
Wow.
But the one thing that I enjoyed the most was when I was cooking. And I enjoyed creating stuff. So I just thought, let's smash those two together.
I mean, was Mexico? So I know Mexico City now is like just this culinary just sensation, and sadly, we were going to go there for my bachelor party. Like, when was that going to be? Like around
Like
now
this month,
sometime. Yeah. So we're not going there, obviously. But
Nope.
hopefully in the future we'll do a nice, couple trip or something out there. But you have all these amazing chefs there now, like the Olveras of the world,
Yep.
right? And I don't know who else there was. That one lady that I'm blanking on right now, but I know she's from there as well. Was that the case back then when you were there? Was like the food scene hot? Was that something that was just brewing?
Not really. Like when I was there, it was traditional Mexican, and also Mexico City was a place that you didn't really go visit. Like you lived there, and it's a very rich city. Like
Right.
there's a lot of money in Mexico.
Right.
Despite my upbringing, Mexico is like one of the wealthiest countries in the world. Like some of the richest people in the world are
Literally, yeah.
Mexican. So Mexico City was very well to do in that sense, but no, not at all. I don't think it was a tenth of what it is now.
Right. What do you think made it that way eventually?
Younger people bringing a new lens to a traditional culture and just bringing in other cuisines into the country. And I think for a long time what happened is people would bring French cuisine or Italian cuisine to Mexico and try to change Mexican cuisine.
Right.
And instead what's happened recently is they actually just took Mexican cuisine and improved it and like amplified it with organic ingredients and really kind of went back to its own roots versus trying to shift it too much.
Right. What were you cooking? I mean, were you cooking Mexican food or?
When I lived in Mexico, yes, but when I moved back to the States, I was at a 2 Michelin star restaurant that was like primarily seafood with some Japanese influence, Providence, and then I also worked at Baco Mercat, so that was a little bit more on the Middle Eastern flavors and a lot of pickled red onions and parsley and pomegranates and things like that.
I think they unfortunately just closed
They
down, right?
just closed. I know.
Yeah, I was just telling Pat that was one of my favorite restaurants. I think like
So
5-6 years ago, and then the owner owns what, like Orsa Winston.
Yeah, Orson Winston, Barama. Yeah.
So you were there 4 years in Mexico, doing everything that you could get your hands on, and just literally everything.
Literally hustling. Yes.
Why'd you come back?
Well, I graduated high school. I graduated college. I had all this money. I had created an entire life, and I was 22. And I kind of looked around, and I was like, really? Is this it? Like, all right, you kind of sort of made it here. You're in another country. You figured it out. You've had your head slammed into the fucking ground like 50 million times. You are hella resilient. You have all these things. Is this where you really want to kind of park it and coast? And
you almost like peaked at 22.
Yeah, and I was like, that's crazy. No.
I mean, you made that much money to be just
Relative to where you
whatever.
were, like in the circumstances.
Oh my God,
Yeah.
yes. I was making more money than like banking executives. Like
Really?
I was really doing quite well for myself.
Just doing all these odd jobs.
I had created so many different opportunities for myself in so many different channels. It was just like I had 50 fishing boats, and then there were all these like fishing lines, and each one of them had caught a big tuna, and they were all coming in, and it was
That's
just.
awesome. I mean, that's
Why
awesome.
do you think that? I know
revolving.
we talked about like just kind of your upbringing, like hustle and all that stuff. Like, was there more to it than that? Like you wanted, like, was there some other motivation to be doing all these different things?
Well, on one side, I needed to prove it to myself and to my parents that I could sustain my own in Mexico, and contrary to maybe people's imagination, Mexico City is not cheap, and I really wanted to be able to make it work. And it was more thrilling to me to land jobs than it was the actual money coming in. I was just excited that I had so many different jobs happening that people were wanting to hire me, and it was a game. It was a game of like, how many jobs can I get? How many people can I work with? How many things can I learn? I was just this sponge for experience, and every single experience, even back then, they were weird and different and unique. And, one of my jobs was being a booth babe is kind of what it's called, but not in like a bikini for Budweiser, more like a suit at a conference where we're talking about, I don't know, it was anything from banking to bulletproof vehicles. And so that experience doing this multiple times a week for different companies gave me the ability to talk to anyone about anything and learn how to have people say no and how to say yes and just to not be afraid. And back then I thought, what am I doing? But I am so grateful that there was still this inkling inside of me telling me, no, you're actually learning, even though this feels very weird, just don't stop because whatever's happening is good for you.
But how'd you have that level of perspective at 21, 22 years old that like, I'm just learning. Like, I don't know where the hell I'm going, but I'm learning. Right, because like I think a lot of people, including myself, have had that realization. Sometimes I still have that realization.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't know where I'm going. Like, I'm doing things. I'm doing a bunch of things. I'm always busy, always doing that. I have a big network, whatever. But where the hell am I going? Right, like that's like that anxiety or that like unknown. You're like,
am I spreading myself too thin?
Yeah.
Am I going deep into one particular, career or path that I could like build into, or am I just like doing a little bit of everything but not really going too deep into it?
Right.
Yeah.
I really feel that doubt kills a lot more dreams than failure actually does. And so when you just try stuff and do it for long enough, I mean, it wasn't like I was just there for 2 months and I left. Like I was at it for 4 years. At 18 by myself in a foreign country, having gotten my Mexican citizenship, right? So I was committed to having success on the other end of it. I do believe that people have different things happen in their life, right? For me, my parents got divorced when I was very young. And I was just like, hell no, I'm not ever going to rely on another human to keep me afloat. Whatever I do, I'm going to find my husband and he'll be with me because I love him and not because I need him. Right. And so there was just this, forward push or inertia from me from within to succeed and to make it in life on my own. And I was kind of having to prove it to myself, not to anybody else, because by the way, nobody was in Mexico with me. Yeah. This was like me, myself, and I on this like Mexican adventure.
Right. Did you create any relationships out there? Because it
100%.
Sounds like you didn't have time to do anything beyond work.
No, I got a boyfriend. I had lots of friends. I had an entire network of amazing people. Yeah. And I did so many beautiful things, and I actually ended up getting married in Mexico so many years later. That picture on the screen is my wedding. Wow. So I got married in Mexico City, and it was incredible because we had 250 people go to Mexico City for our wedding that are from the U.S. and get to experience what I grew up doing.
And you met your husband in
No,
Mexico
he's
City.
from here.
Oh, he's from here. Okay,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're 22. You're a rich person, Mexican American citizen. What are you going to do? Are you trying to retire? Or what's the goal?
No, I sold everything. And what I did, it was one of the most therapeutic experiences I think I've ever had. I let go of everything I had gotten at 22. I basically sold it all, got rid of my apartment, cut all my ties and all my jobs and did all of that. And I traveled around the world for 2.5 months, backpacking style. And slept on people's couches, went to Mount Fuji in Japan. I climbed Mount Fuji. I went to alone. I went to Brazil. I went to see the Iguazu Falls. I went to freaking Stonehenge. Weird decisions, but I was just Stonehenge, that's something you do when you're on a life journey. It was eat, pray, love, minus the love part. Not a lot of loving happened. But it was amazing because it just made me go out and see the world and touch it and feel it, and also let go of all the materialistic stuff that I had accumulated in 4 years. And it gave me the confidence that if I could do it once, I could do it again. That therefore, all that shit I had accumulated and I had made was not what made me. I had made it, and if I could make it once, I could make it one more time.
It's like a phoenix.
Yeah, totally.
So give us one distinct memory from that trip that we should know. Or
I mean, one was just so bizarre. When I was climbing Mount Fuji, there were 80 mile an hour winds, and there was a guy on the mountain that I had met who was also hiking, and everyone had evacuated the mountain because no one was nuts enough to keep going during this insane windstorm and rainstorm, and him and I stayed on the mountain, and we ran down the mountain at some point because our lights started to blink at night, and so we were going to not have any power on the side of a mountain. Our flashlights were going to die. So we ran to the bottom of the bathroom on the bottom of the mountain and slept on the bathroom floor together. And he like tried to make a move, and I was just like, nope, this is not happening. We are on the side of a mountain in a bathroom. Let's all be nice here and just sleep through the night. You sit over there and I will be here. And the next morning we climbed the mountain together.
That's great.
And then we came back down, got on the train, and I like never talked to the guy again. I was like, get away. Thank you for climbing next to me. Goodbye.
Wow.
I thought there was gonna be a happy ending, and like we ended up in Mexico City married. Now that would have been a better ending.
I like used him to get up the mountain. No, I mean he was there and I was there. We climbed together.
Emotional support.
Emotional support, exactly. So that was a weird twist.
Yeah.
So you come back from this trip, and what do you?
Oh,
what do
it
you
was
do?
it was the worst hangover of all time. Not because I was drinking. It was the worst hangover of life because I landed back in my mom's house.
You're like, this is it?
In her bedroom, in my old bedroom.
That was
And I
yellow.
was just like, what just happened? It was like all this big giant blur of life that had just occurred. And I thought, no, I'm back at square one. No. So I had to shake that off really quickly and just kind of humble myself and realize what I had said, which was if I could do it once, I could do it again. And I just had to build from the ground up.
Right.
And that's when I got my job at Providence and started working at these different restaurants.
Yeah. So talk to us about that. You've obviously had done a bunch of things. You loved cooking, but like, why did you want to go back into the scene? Like, I mean, I know Providence and all these restaurants, or LA became this like spot and hub for great food and great culinary experiences, and still is, pre-COVID. But what made you decide that you want to go that route? After all this stuff, after all these experiences, I'm going to settle on the culinary world. Yeah. I know you went to culinary school, but like, why did you decide that that's what you were going to do?
Well, I wanted to have my own sort of restaurant taco empire situation. Like I wanted to cook, but I didn't want to necessarily do all the cooking. I wanted to have like a business around it. And I thought in order to do that, I need to go and get experience in that field. So a friend of mine gave me a list of the top 10 restaurants in LA, and she said, go to these restaurants between 2 and 4 and you can probably see if you can get a job. So that's what I did. And I just went one by one down that list, and I was turned down on 8 of them, and 2 of them gave me the opportunity, and it was Providence and Baco. And Baco gave me the opportunity maybe halfway through that list, and Providence was like 4 in, but I committed myself to the end. So I like went to all 10, and that was just something I feel like I learned from Mexico of you just show up. Like you don't not go because you got a hit or you got something that was, close the sale, if you will. Right. I was like, no, I got to get to the end of that list. So I got those 2 opportunities, and then I just started working and literally climbed my way up from there.
What were you doing? Like you were a line cook or?
Yeah, I was a line cook. I was picking herbs. I was shucking oysters. I was, sauteing razor clams. Like I was just doing anything that they would let me do, and I was learning all over again. I was just a sponge, and I quickly realized I knew very little, and that everything I needed to know I had to absorb by everybody around me. And so I took one more bite of the humble pie and really kind of realized where I was at in my cooking career and just did the work.
How long?
I was there for 2.5 years, and somewhere along the way there, I started Hedley and Bennett on the side, and that quickly overtook my whole life very, very rapidly. And I was also a personal chef with a family, and I was also working at Baco. So I had 3 jobs. I couldn't get away from the multiple jobs, and I had to keep trimming each job like by a day so that I had a little more time to focus on Hedley and Bennett until I was literally working at every hour of every day, setting up the farmer's market on Sunday at 6 a.m., breaking it down by 2 p.m., shoving everything into my little Mini Cooper and driving to Providence, which was 5 minutes away, and clocking into service by 3, and then breaking down at midnight. I mean, it was just insane. And I knew it was time. Like, I needed to let go of the safety net of the restaurant world and actually fully commit to Hedley and Bennett. But this was probably a year into Hedley and Bennett. I left
What
Providence.
year is this?
2012.
Yeah.
So talk to us about
2012.
talk to us about like what happened like at when you were working that you like the idea for Hedley and Bennett came to you. Like, what did you see? What did you come across?
I am a runner and I do marathons and I just really enjoy that athletic side of life. And when I first started running in Mexico, I went and got an amazing outfit from Nike or Adidas or something. And I put it on and I was like, I'm a fucking runner now. Yes.
Yeah.
And I felt so legit and real and proper. I thought, man, if I could make people feel that way in the kitchen, you could like change the culinary world. Like this
Right.
could be something really cool. And
Makes you feel official. Like
yeah,
you're
like
the real
proper,
deal.
but also badass.
Yeah.
And I wanted that feeling for myself. My uniforms were horrendous. Everybody was walking around with these like big giant balloon pants and like shirts that looked like they were, 6X, like not even 4, like 6. I mean, huge. And it just didn't make any logical sense that no one had thought about it. So I started thinking about it and making it better and talking to chefs and being like, what do you love? What do you hate? Tell me how would you do it if you could make it better? And just being a curious George, as I usually am. And then, of course, as life would have it, Joseph Santana was like, hey, there's a girl. She's going to make us some aprons. Do you want to buy one? And I was like, chef, wait, I have an apron company. I will make you those aprons. What are you talking about? You got to give me the order. And that was how Hedley and Bennett started. And I did not have a company and I didn't have a pattern. I literally had nothing. I just
had an idea.
I just knew that I could do it. I had lived so many experiences and I had committed myself to so many things that I had hit the goals on that I thought, if I'm telling him I can do this, I can actually do it.
And just to clarify, Santana was the Baca Marcotte owner chef, right?
Yep.
At the time when you were trying to get that order, did you even have anything made?
No, I didn't. I had a doing business as. That's all I had. And it wasn't even Hedley and Bennett. It was like something else then.
But like, how did you know that you were going to be able to make it?
I just knew. I know that if I make a decision, I will figure out how to do it because I've done it enough times that you just sort of earn those notches of confidence in life.
Okay, but let's break it down because there's, I'm sure, a ton of people listening now that are thinking, okay, I have an idea.
Yeah.
And I don't know how the hell I'm going to do it. But, okay, you have the idea for these aprons.
Yeah.
You have an opportunity to give these people the apron. What's this next step? The immediate next step. What do you do?
The immediate next step was I clocked out and I literally called a guy that I worked with, and him and I had been talking about the aprons together, and we basically started looking up places that sold fabric. We're like, we need fabric. We need to show him swatches. We need to go find the raw material. And I treated it a little bit like I do with cooking, right? You want to make a recipe. You've never made the recipe before. You go find the raw ingredients, right? You got to find the market. If you're going to make something Persian, go find a Persian market. If you're going to make it Mexican, go and find a Mexican market. Find your base, right? So I thought about it. I just broke it down and simplified it. I didn't worry about all the intricacies and what if I don't have this plan and all this stuff. I just kind of focused on the basics. And from there, I found a friend who could make me a pattern, and I hustled him into making me the pattern if I made him dinner because I worked at Providence. So I could like leverage my skill sets here. So then he made me a pattern, and then I had another friend, and I was like, well, I have a pattern. I will come over and make you breakfast, and you better make me the actual sample. And so I was just using what I had and focusing on what I had and not what I didn't have. And I didn't have investors, and I didn't have a business plan, and I didn't have resources, but I had myself, and I had my cooking skills, and I knew all of this sort of design elements I wanted to add to the apron. Not to mention I had Joseph telling me exactly what he wanted to. So it was a collaboration.
What did he want? I mean, like,
he wanted something that was denim with a little bit of a red accent, and he wanted it to fit well, and he loved the idea of it being adjustable on the neck because aprons typically back then were not adjustable.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, like, was it like pretty uniform, like the styles? Like, was it pretty standard as far as the
ours or
no, like just general aprons?
Oh yeah, they were so bad. It was like poly cotton, polyester blended with cotton, so starchy and stiff. It was just awful. Like you could, wash dishes with the with the material.
Like there was no one like bringing creativity to the space.
No, zero.
Yeah.
Zero. And no creativity, and also no branding, no anything. And so he didn't do embroidery, but very quickly after, almost every chef I worked with wanted, like John and Vinny's, they were like, okay,
like custom.
Yeah, they wanted it custom. They wanted cool denims. They wanted to put their name on it. And we just started to learn how to make these products even better because everything was custom.
But early on, did you know that this was going to be big? Like, I know you talk about, you want the Nike for like basically chefs and cooks and for food folks, the culinary folks. But on day one, was that the goal still? Or was it just, I want to figure out how to make an apron and then we'll figure out the rest?
My goal was make the best apron in the world. That was as big or as little as you want to think of it. That was the like tunnel vision that I had. Make the best apron in the world. And when people hear apron, they think cute. They think grandma's apron. They think shit that's just like, honestly, not great. And I went the polar opposite direction. And most of my customers at the beginning, honestly, were men. And you wouldn't think of an apron company having their core consumer be a man, but they were. And now our business, so many years later, and I'm sure you're going to throw me back into the earlier part of the story, but like so many years later, 80% of our business is direct to consumer. So now we have all these home cooks, people wearing our product because it's legit and real, but it's not cute. It's proper. It's dignified. It makes you look legit, makes you feel legit. And it's actually a tool everyone needs in their own kitchen, even though most people are not used to wearing an apron at home.
Right.
So throwing it back to the earlier part of the story.
Yeah. See, I knew you were going to do that.
Was the idea that
bringing it back?
Was the idea that you're going to source this raw material and like knit it like yourself, just hand do it?
No, I was going to find somebody because I don't know how to sew.
Yeah.
So just how I had found where to get the fabric, I went and found a guy that knew a guy. He was a guy that had made leather shoes, and he had worked with this man for one opportunity a really long time ago, and he connected me with him. And I remember pulling up to the guy's house, and it was in the middle of nowhere, and there were, stray dogs running everywhere, and old dilapidated like cars in the parking lot, and the windows were sort of shattered. And
this is in California?
Yes, this was like in LA. And it was pretty shady. And I walked up, and the guy looked like a drug dealer, and that was my guy. He was my guy that made.
I'm an apron dealer.
He was an apron dealer. So he made me the first batch of Hedley and Bennett aprons, and he actually had a really aggressive atelier inside of his house. Outside where all the dogs were running, inside it was like a full-blown like workshop. And so that was where the first
it's like one of those recording studios. I don't know if you've seen them. Like outside it's like a rundown like breaking down house, and then you go inside, it's like polished studio.
Totally.
Like, $1 million studio.
Oh no, this guy was just old school tailor. He knew what was up, and that man made our first batch. But he kind of hustled us too. But his sewer, one day as I was walking out, slipped me a note, and it said Jose with his number on it. And Jose, I called him, and he was like, "Hey, I think you're really onto something. This is really interesting. I'd love to come work for you full time, and I'll just make you all the aprons you want. I'm doing the work anyway, and then I can make a little more, and you can make a little more." And I said, "Okay, let's do it." But at that point, I was still a cook at Providence, and I was still working full time. And now all of a sudden I had this guy who was going to do it out of his house in Compton. And so it was Jose and I against the world for the first, 7 months. And we went from making, one apron a week to hundreds of aprons a week. And Jose, he just ate, breathed, and like slept on aprons. It was just like the whole world became aprons for us.
Wow.
Who was buying these aprons?
I was going to farmers markets. I was talking to chefs. It was very word of mouth, and it caught on like wildfire. Like one chef told another chef, and then you'd see David Chang wearing it, and people were like, "Well, what's
It's
that
a small,
thing?"
small
And
community, right?
it's a very tight knit community that, quite honestly, is pretty damn hard to penetrate. Like they have their people, and they have their people, and it just got out quickly that there was a girl. Her name was Ellen. She was this like apron lady, and she'll make you cool shit, and she really cares, and she's nice, and like she's cool, just call her. And so it was a lot of that where it would be a text message with another chef, and a chef would say, "Hey, I have a guy, he's coming into LA, you should swing by the restaurant and like bring him an apron or something."
Right.
And then that chef looked cool because he was introducing me to this other chef, and it just snowballed.
Yeah, I'm just thinking like I love this story because even after like hearing hundreds, 50 founders at this point, after hearing 150 founders, it's just incredible that you don't have to go out there and build like a fintech company and like get data and no hate to the fintech people, by
fintech.
the way.
I just learned what fintech was the other day.
Financial technology.
What the hell
for those
is
that don't
that?
know. But anyways, you don't have to go out there and do things that are just like crazy, like complicated and complex and challenging, right? And I'm not trying to, diminish what an apron is, but like you can literally make an apron and be like a badass entrepreneur and start amazing companies and employ people. And I mean, that's like all it takes is like literally one idea. And like, I think Pat and I both tell people that, like, I get people who talk to us all the time, like, hey, what advice do you have for like starting a business, right? I'm just like, honestly, like come up with one simple idea and then like figure out the rest. Like I'm not in the right.
This was something that I can imagine. I mean, it's integral to the uniform of a chef, right? It's such like, or just anyone who's like a cook or working on the line. Yep. But I can imagine this was something at the time, or maybe you can tell us, was it like an overlooked part of the process? Like
100%.
We wear this thing, it's so important, but no one's innovating on it. No one's doing anything.
It was practically like a Post-it.
Yeah.
Where you're like, what? Why didn't anyone think of putting a little bit of stickiness at the top of it that will make it so much more functional?
I actually just read about that story the other day.
Yeah, that's a crazy story.
Yeah.
But yes, it was very right in front of your face.
Yeah.
And I think to this day people are still like, wait, what? It's aprons? But honestly, it was so much more than aprons. What we did is we gave it a heartbeat. We gave people a feeling. Like we were not just selling a garment with straps on it that you put on. Like you were a part of this community that believed in making shit happen. And if you wore it in the way that you put on your Jordans and you're like, oh my God, I'm kind of like Michael Jordan. It was that same feeling. Like you were a chef that cared about the details and you were going out of your way to make yourself look and feel better, make your team look and feel better. Therefore, you cared about the details. Instead of going to Cisco to buy your tomatoes, you're going to the Santa Monica Farmers Market. Like that was the chef buying Hedley and Bennett.
And was that your pitch early on? Like that's exactly what you're saying? Or was that sort of something that you over time saw that this is the feeling that we're creating, this is the type of emotion?
I saw it over time.
Yeah.
Because my pitch was never a pitch. It was more like me being someone else's friend and me very excitedly sharing something that I was doing with them. So I never treated anyone like a transaction. I instead created a bunch of friendships and I was there to help them get something that they needed and we got to collaborate building it together. And that was always my approach. And to this day, when I'm hiring customer experience team members, like I onboarded somebody today, we take them through our entire brand essence of the company. It's like a 50-page deck that was created by our marketing team. And we talk about how no one is a transaction. I don't care if they're buying a pair of socks or it's a $20,000 order. Like they are a human on the other end of the line and you better make them feel like they had a better day because they interacted with Hedley and Bennett. And that's just the ethos of what we're doing. Right. And really it started with the apron, but now it's like morphed into so many other things, but at its core, the heartbeat is the apron. It's this thing that like you put on and then you're ready for action.
So we won't talk too much about the early days anymore, but like as things...
Well, actually, sorry, I have one more question about the early days. I love the early days.
With the early days.
It's all about the early days. It's super important. Yeah, I'm curious. Once you start going to these farmers markets, telling these chefs, and they're telling each other.
Yeah.
How were you able to like fulfill their orders quickly enough? It was just you and Jose, or like, did you start hiring people like really quickly, or how?
It was insane. Yeah. It was just. You kind of go into warp speed and you're just running really hard and trying to organize as you go while also just dealing with the rush of stuff and not caving. And I think that my time in professional kitchens really helped me have the grit to not give up, because when you're in service in a restaurant, you have 70 tickets and the chef is yelling and this guy over here is like, where the hell's my dish? And you have 5 dishes in front of you have to finish. There's no exit. There's not like,
Was it military style? I'm not too familiar. Like where you worked?
It was like, a 2 Michelin star restaurant, so it was about as serious as it gets.
Providence,
yeah. Like
Baca Mercado was probably more chill.
It was more chill, but still, we would have hundreds of tickets in one
it's
night.
Craziness, right?
It's insane. It's like you're in a team and the ship is going down. You got to find a way to like pull out all the water from the ship as it's literally sinking, and then you get back, and at the end of the day, you're like, "Woo! The ship didn't sink, yay!" But you like almost died 5 times. Yeah. So there was that constant feeling, and it was almost like this wild adrenaline. And I thrived on it. Like, I loved the feeling of we have a goal and we have to get there. So if I had X amount of orders and I only had so much time, I really calculated my time of waking up, run to Jose's, pick up the fabric first while I'm driving to Jose's. But on my way back, I'm going to get the groceries for the personal chef family that I cook for. And then I'm going to go to Providence and I have to be there by 3. But I have 20 minutes while I'm eating lunch so I can squeeze in one sales call while I'm eating lunch, and then I'll clock back in just in enough time so that I can get that one other thing done. And while I'm cooking on the line, I've got my notebook and I'm not writing everything down. So it was just this very aggressive volume of multitasking. And my mom always said, you want something done, give it to a busy person. Like, I wasn't dicking around ever. I was just moving quick enough that I never stopped to worry about things for too long. Like, I never pondered on stuff for too long. But that kept me kind of pushing to the next one.
But did it ever get to a point where you're like strapped, where you're like, you couldn't possibly, carry on and fulfill orders in time unless you started hiring people, which probably required some extra cash to go raise money? Like, did that ever happen?
Yes, I did not raise money, but I did get to a place where I was drowning and Jose was drowning and we were just drowning in apron straps. And I found a girl. She met me at some dinner, and literally I was walking to my car in the parking lot, and she's like, hey, what you're doing sounds really interesting. If you ever need help, I'd love to help you. And I was like, do you have time tonight? And she said, sure. So she came to my house that night, and Marissa ended up working for me for 6 years, and she was my first employee ever. And she became our number 1 sales rep, and she's incredible, and now she works at La Colombe. But it was great coffee, and they actually provide the entire office with coffee.
And
now.
Hopefully they wear your aprons.
And they wear our aprons. But that was a beautiful kind of kismet-y moment of someone coming into my life when I really needed them, and she was just in the trenches with me for a long time.
Yeah, so I guess now I can move on from the early days.
Well done. We graduated.
I can't promise. Yeah, I can't promise.
I don't know, guys. I feel like we're going to circle back.
I know. We'll probably circle back at one point. But as things progress, right, you hire your first employee, second employee, third employee. I imagine you eventually get, this warehouse office space. Did things get a lot more challenging, or it became just more so it was natural for you to be this leader, to be this person who is running this company? Because it's very different to the early days, start the company and then actually and have an idea and be able to execute on it, and then actually be building and growing and scaling it so that it's beyond just like who you are and who like what you do. So talk to us a little bit about that experience.
Yes, it definitely grew beyond me pretty quickly, and we started having to hire more people. And it became really quite a learning curve for me as a founder, but also as an entrepreneur, because you now don't know how to do everything, but you're responsible for other humans. right? And so now you have payroll and workers' comp and liabilities attached to that, and deadlines and customers, and it grows rapidly.
Right.
And so I had to get a mosh pit of people that I met along the way that I would ask a lot of questions to, and between listening to podcasts on my way to the office, and trying to find as many strategic employees as I could to help us. But there's no real simple way to build a business. Like, it does not get easier. You just get more resilient over time. You learn how to deal with shit and life and stress better, and you find what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are. And at least for me, I just identified what I was good at and tried to get as many people as I could to take on the things that I wasn't as good at. And that helped along the way. But I mean, I always talk to my other business owner friends, and the amount of hockey sticks to the face that you take as a founder or a business owner is just so beyond that it is not for the faint of heart. Like, if you don't actually have a real passion for what you're doing or a genuine purpose, you're better off, honestly, going and being an entrepreneur within a company than starting your own business. You can be an entrepreneur within a company. Right. And honestly, we need them. Like, you need someone who's a self-starter within a company, but owning your own business is not the only way to do it.
What were some of those hockey sticks to the face moment?
I mean, the list is longer than the successes. Like, you only read about the really cool things and you only see it on Fast Company. So you just kind of assume that everything's peachy and roses. But I don't know a single founder, no matter how successful they are, that they've had like an easy journey.
Totally. But I'm curious about like some of those moments. Like, what were those like? Because it's not only like what happened, but more so like the fact that you were able to survive it.
Yeah. So multiple times my CFO was like, nobody died, just keep going. So that was just something that she would say to me. So I was like, all right, okay.
Motto of the day.
Motto of the day,
was
nobody
she one of your
died.
first hires?
She was one of my first. She was my first executive hire.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I was actually reading something recently that like, I think it was about like finance directors or VP finance or CFO that like, as a startup, you should probably hire that as one of your like first roles, because you don't realize that you need it until you actually have that person.
And how many startups fail because they just don't know how to manage money?
No. So when she came in, we had 2 outsourced companies, 1 person in-house, but they were kind of out of house too. And the books, all the numbers weren't aligned, and we were making money, but we didn't know how much. It was just chaos. And she really helped identify exactly what were our assets, what were our liabilities, how much money did we have to spend on inventory, how much money was tied in inventory, things like that. But just the blindness of that was very crippling as a founder, because you just didn't know which direction to go. I just knew we needed to keep making money, and we needed to not spend more than we made. So the things that kept me alive were don't spend more than you make, and like reinvest every penny back into the business that you can. And I really just stuck to keeping my word. If we said we were going to deliver at said date, we delivered. And those were the things that maintained trust no matter what happened. Our vendors knew that we were always going to pay them on time. I had 0 debt, and I really was diligent about not spending more than I made.
I'm curious, one of the things, you often see in business, or like businesses are predicated upon as like this recurring revenue, recurring customer bases.
Yeah.
And I'm not too certain how it works. Like, does the wardrobe need to be replenished like often for these restaurants? Does it happen?
Totally.
Yeah.
Our current customers do about 1.5 times a year.
Okay.
Yeah. So you'll order, and then you get more because you have more staff, stuff like that. And that's really our like restaurant channel, right? We also included in there our corporate sales, and we outfit places like Yahoo and Google and SpaceX and stuff like that. And we even work with, companies that you wouldn't expect us to work with, like Discovery Channel and things like that. We will also make them a lot of gear. And then on the other side, you've got your online D2C model. So that's kind of growing in tandem with the other side of the business.
Yeah.
And it's just fascinating because most businesses are either D2C or B2B. They're
It's
not
hard to do both. Yeah, it's very hard to do both.
Yeah. And so we've found a way to do both.
I'm curious, obviously before the pandemic and with just everybody going out to restaurants, eating whatever, there was a lot more people working in the restaurants.
Yeah.
And now that's not necessarily the case,
Yep.
Unfortunately, across the country, across the world. Has that affected, or how has that affected, I should ask, your business when it comes to the B2B side of things, where you're dealing with these corporations and restaurant owners who the people aren't necessarily always there?
Yeah. So it definitely, when COVID hit, we saw such a decline in sales towards restaurants. But pretty immediately after, because we were doing face masks, all of those restaurants needed face masks. So it was like blip down and then skyrocket up because they all needed to be protected. And there's a lot of companies that started making face masks, right? But we were one of the very first ones, and we pivoted so rapidly and so aggressively. We were shipping within 5 days of the pivot.
Plus, no one wants to wear Nike socks and Adidas shoes. Like you gotta match.
You
it
gotta
a little
rep
bit.
the rep. Yeah, you gotta
exactly.
be like outfitted out. And
I'm all over the place today, so
no judgments.
I got Adidas,
No judgments.
Lululemon, and whatever the hell this was. I can't
Uniqlo?
remember. Uniqlo. There you go. How'd you know?
You know.
You know.
I'm a schmata. I've been at it for 8
There
years.
you go.
But yeah, no, we started making the face masks, and I did it with the same damn perspective as I did the first apron. I was like, what do they need? What do they hate? What's wrong with it? And I asked a doctor, not a chef, for all that information. And over FaceTime, the day of the shutdown, him and I came up with the design, and the next day it went live on our website, which was on a Saturday. And on Monday, we started making the product, and by Wednesday, we had shipped. And to date, we have, I think we've done close to 1 million masks.
Jeez.
And we have donated well over 300,000 masks because we did a buy one, donate one model.
Yeah.
When the restaurants kind of got hit, did you see a shift? Because what happened, I think, early on, I always talk about like early quarantine now.
Yeah.
Talk about early days now.
It's
early
March
quarantine.
186 today.
It's like EQ, early quarantine. It's like EQ and then
Emotional intelligence
and early quarantine. And there's this PQ, which is pre-quarantine, and then hopefully there's the next PQ, which is post-quarantine.
Yeah.
Or TQ, which is thank you, bye-bye. But did you see that there was a shift from the B2B to the B2C side, where people started cooking at home? They were baking. I mean, at one point I went to get like chocolate chips and flour for like my Beyonce and mother-in-law, and like it's gone.
Yeah.
So it's like people were going crazy baking and cooking at home.
Banana bread.
Yeah, banana bread, chocolate chip, this and that.
Banana bread was a hit.
Yeah, I know actually a friend that she quit. Well, the restaurant stopped, functioning. She started a cookie company and now is doing like 10,000. One of our listeners is doing like $10,000 a month in cookie sales. Like she's killing it, right?
Amazing.
So did that shift in like consumer behavior that was forced?
Yep.
How did that affect you guys, or what did that do?
Yeah, no, it forced the entire company to focus on direct to consumer. And while we for sure had restaurant accounts coming through and wanting face masks, we didn't make a single apron for close to 4 months.
Wow.
Like all we made in our entire supply chain were face masks. And that was a wild thing that caused focus, but it also created a sense of just kind of really reprioritizing, right? Any playbook that anyone had pre-COVID just exploded, and you had to look at what was in front of you and what was working, what wasn't working. And we had already had a whole plan of, direct to consumer and bringing all of our products to the everyday person, because unlike a lot of brands out there, like they're sexy, they have great packaging and all this stuff, and you get the product and it's like subpar.
Mm-hmm.
For us, we focus on product. We didn't focus on packaging. So you got okay packaging, but our product is fantastic, right? So now it's about balancing it out and making it look and feel as amazing as the product actually is, and educating the home consumer in the same way that we educated the chef 8 years ago to needing this thing.
Right.
I'm curious, like, what you think the future of this space looks like as far as like just restaurants, the food services space. What have you seen, or like what do you think is going to happen in the next couple of years? Because we're seeing so many different reports and this and that,
Yeah.
like and predictions of what people think is going to happen. But I'm just curious what you think.
I think that it's not going to look how it's looked like right now for a very long time, like multiple years. Like we're not going to just bounce back to having fine dining everywhere. I think fine dining has really taken the biggest hit, right? And it's going to be a very serious luxury to be able to do fine dining at the pace at which we were doing it before, where you had a Michelin star, 2 Michelin star restaurant in every street corner practically. And a lot of it is going to go to, I think, fast casual and to go and ghost kitchens and things that make it a little bit more remote. And the business model of restaurants was just already broken before COVID. COVID just kind of put the
I
nail
feel like it's
in
like
the
that
coffin.
in so many like education too.
Totally.
It's like
just
these
like
fundamentally broken.
It was broken, and
spaces.
it took something as aggressive as COVID to force the reset.
Or like accelerate the innovation and the shift.
Exactly. And I think the people I see really doing very well in the space have done dramatic pivots and then another pivot. And by trying and testing different ways, right now no one's judging, right? Right now it's kind of the wild, wild west.
Right.
Nobody's watching. Nobody's judging if your restaurant closes. Nobody is really looking. So you have the opportunity to flip everything on its head, because it's already there, by the way, and just start trying different things and adapting.
Yeah, I think everyone's just trying to figure it out.
You're just trying to figure it out, and no one's going to blame you for that.
Yeah, like take those risks.
Exactly.
Do it now.
Does that mean that like your business is going to shift now to be able to service those folks? I mean, like how? I mean, what does that even look like?
For us, I can't tell you what's going to happen. I don't think anyone can tell anybody what's going to happen, right? I'm like, oh, let's just wait till November when that happens.
I don't know.
Hold on to your bootstraps.
One step at a time.
Yeah. For us, what we are doing is focusing on just making the product that much better and servicing all the home cooks and educating them and leaning hard into that. And we used to kind of stretch ourselves thin and do a lot of different things with a lot of different people and lots of collaborations. So for us, it's doing less better, just focusing the shit out of Hedley and Bennett and really analyzing our resources and seeing where do we need to put resources and where do we not. And the things that we don't need to do anymore, we're cutting, and we've already cut. So it's allowed us to be laser focused in a way that the world forced it.
Right. As a founder, how do you continue to educate yourself? Like, even like forget COVID for a second, but like, you're obviously always learning. You always have to just iterate your business and yourself and learn new concepts and be aware of what's going on in the world. Like, what do you do?
Oh, such a good question. Well, I really like to surround myself with people that are even smarter than me. So I'm constantly on calls, meeting other entrepreneurs, or if someone sold their company or if they've had multiple businesses, and I like to pick their brain.
Who are some of these mentors, if you don't mind me asking?
There's a few. So Dana Cowan, who was the editor-in-chief of Food and Wine for 24 years, longtime mentor of mine. This other guy, Marty Bailey, who's the chief manufacturing officer of American Apparel, on a really brilliant guy, and he has taught me so many different things. One of the things I love the most that he's taught me that has nothing to do with business, but everything to do with business, he said, say please, say thank you, and what do you think? And think about that. That's just like some basic, serious knowledge. Because if you just remember to say please, thank you, and what do you think, you're kind of making people feel like they're heard, making people feel like they're there, like they're present, they're important, and that they matter. So just little tidbits like that have stuck with me along the way. And I'm constantly collecting people. I'll go out and meet some old guy, and I'm like, oh my God, you did what? We have to talk. Let's get on a call, or let's have coffee, or let's go for a walk, or whatever. And I have no judgments for where the knowledge comes from. I just want to learn. And so being very open to learning and not saying, I already know how to do that. I think that's kind of like a big blocker for some people if they just assume they already know about it, so they're not going to hear that thing. Some great suggestions come from lots of different people in my company, and they don't even need to be on the executive level to come up with a great idea.
You use the word early on, like in the podcast.
Yeah.
Again, going back to the early, well,
Going
not early
on to
days,
the
but
early days of the
Yes.
podcast. And that word was colorful.
Yeah.
Right. And it was, I think, in reference to like your Mexican heritage and just how Mexicans and Mexico are and is. Does that, or did that ever play a role in the design of Hedley and Bennett and what you make? Like, how did you involve your culture and your roots in this brand?
Bringing it down with the good questions. I love it. So Hedley was my English grandfather. Bennett is my last name. And Hedley and Bennett was inspired by my Mexican and English culture coming together. So proper and sort of timeless and put together, combined with whimsical, colorful, fly by the seat of your pants, figure it out, just like alive. And if you look at the style of our company, there's a timeless vibe to it. You know, it's not necessarily trendy. It's just good design. And then you combine that with fun colors and things like that. There's a heartbeat to it. So that was really always my approach. I'm playing the long game here.
Right.
I'm not about a flash in the pan to be on the cover of Forbes. Like, I want a company that's going to exist for a long time, and we're 8 years in, and I plan to have another 40 ahead of us. So that to me is success. Like, one thing is to grow it, another thing is to like maintain it, and you got to be unique. And I think color really brings a lot of uniqueness to us as a brand, because we're not everything pastel pink, and we're not everything like matte black.
Right.
We're our own version. We are colorful. We are technicolor, and that's the way we want to be. We want to bring that spunk to people's lives. That's why the soul of our Vans and Hedley and Bennett collaboration is literally the rainbow outside of our factory. Like, the soul matches that rainbow wall.
Well, this has been amazing. I don't know if you have any other questions, but this is like,
I'm not going to take up more time.
As Posh mentioned, we've interviewed like almost 150 people at this point, and this is probably one of my favorite stories that I've heard, because there's just so much to like just take away from it and learn from it. And you've built an incredible company, and we can't wait to see what the next 40 years looks like.
I just think,
you know, it's like you kind of alluded to, you know, it's like someone who's into basketball wearing a pair of Jordans and feeling good about themselves. I can imagine it's very similar, wearing a Hedley and Bennett apron or whatever, and feeling like just so much more powerful, and that they could do anything in the kitchen, pretty much.
Yeah, if you see that little red ampersand, that little and patch, it's like you're part of a squad. It's really real.
Yeah, we were talking about it earlier because we interviewed Chef Tim from Odium, and I think we definitely have seen that like and sign on his thing.
Yeah, on his apron.
Yeah, but you know, I was just thinking, like, just to piggyback off of Pat, you know, it would be awesome if one day, like in the next 10, 15 years, maybe even earlier, if you just wrote a book of like just put on your apron, and you just kind of go through the journey of like these different founders that literally took like one product, like a simple product.
I actually wrote a book, and it comes out next April 2021. It's called Dream First, Details Later, How to Quit Overthinking It and Make Shit Happen.
Wow.
Maybe we could change the title to like put on your apron, but you know, I won't mess with your publisher there. I'm sure they'll kill you if you change it.
When Random House is going to shut it down.
Yeah. So that comes out April
2021.
Okay, we'll make sure to read it.
Yeah, and follow us on Instagram 100%. At Ellen Marie Bennett and Hedley and Bennett. Come check out my giant 200-pound pig that lives at my house. Yeah, we're a colorful, quirky crew over here.
Love it.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Ellen.